So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Climate and Health. We're going to start with the land acknowledgement. So, we're going to hear from our um, guest, Karina Gould, who is, wait a second, I'm sorry, my notes are here, they are. She is the tribal chair of for the Confederated Villages of Lejeune, Ohlone. She was born and raised in Oakland. And in the territory of Huichin. She's an indigenous activist and organizer that has worked on preserving and protecting ancient burial grounds of her ancestors in the Bay Area for decades. She's the co-founder and lead organizer for Indian People Organizing for Change, a small native run grassroots organization, and co-founder of the Sogorea Land Trust, an urban indigenous women's community organization working to return and to and to indigenous stewardship in San Francisco's East Bay. So, good morning, Karina. Thank you for being here. We always are so blessed to have you join us and start our day on the right note. So, thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Cheryl. It's wonderful to be here this morning with you all. And Horshe Tuhi Ka'at Lashanka Ka'at Ra'at Karina. It's always good to start our day here in our territory with our language that is waking itself up. Behind me, you see the place of our creation, a place that's called Tuyushtak, a place for thousands of years of our creation stories, but what most people now call is Mount Diablo. And today, as we're going into talking about health and climate, I think it's really important for us to begin to remember that we are in this time of fall equinox and the time of harvesting and the time of bringing in and the time of gathering and abundance, and a time of sharing. And I think that that's a place that we should start from, a place of abundance where anything is possible as we dream into this new season. And so I'm going to ask everyone to take some deep breaths and dream in that good stuff today, that abundance that we need for our planet, for our health, for each other, a way for us to begin to remember what our responsibilities are. And so let's take that first deep breath, and that first deep breath, let it cleanse our minds and our hearts and our spirits as we get ready to go into this work together. So we'll take a deep breath in for 4, and then we'll let it go for 8. So take a deep breath in and let it out. We'll take a deep breath in for all of our lands that were affected by fires over the summer and those that are still going. We ask our rain relatives to come in and to help to put those fires out, and ask for a good relationship with our relative fire who has always been on these lands for thousands of years to help to regenerate places, and let us get back into that right relationship. So let's take a deep breath in and out. Let's take a deep breath in for the mental health of folks, people that are dealing with issues that we don't even know, things that are unseen, those that are dealing with the pressures of oppression right now, those that are dealing with being without a roof over their head and the horrible things that are happening in the Bay Area because of new laws that were created. Let's remember our relatives that are facing sickness right now, and those that are having a hard time with those that have passed over. Let's hold a gentle heart for all of those that are having a difficult time this morning as we start out. And be gentle with ourselves. And so let's take a deep breath in and let it go. Let's take a deep breath in for the joy that we're calling in, for all of the good things that have happened over the summer, for all of the good things we see happening in the fall, for our strength and courage, for us to continue to do the work that our ancestors have called us to do in this lifetime. Take a deep breath in and let it go. And this last breath in together as we come together today, let us remember all of the things that that we need to take care of, but let us focus in on the things that are most important and let go of things that we don't need anymore. Let's take a deep breath in and let it go. Thank you so much for joining together in this time, for us to gather strength together, for us to do this good work together. We thank so much for Cheryl and all of the organizers and all of the folks that have come to share their good work with us today. We help and help us to do this work in good ways. Reach out to those and share some soup over the nice cold winter evenings that are coming up, and continue to do to bring in our ancestral foods and our ways of being on this land together. I thank you so much again. Have a great day, Cheryl.
Thank you so much, Karina. And again, congratulations on the Shell Mound. And I look forward to the next event because that last one, I'm still remembering all the beautiful people, the beautiful food, the beautiful prayers and dancing. Thank you so much for all that you do for our community.
Thank you.
Have a blessed day.
You too.
All right. So welcome everyone. You're at Climate and Health. This is the second of our CEMTF Virtual Summit series. We started out with climate and biodiversity in July. Now here we are with climate and health. And it's the fifth virtual summit series. And the overall title is Climate Colonization, Rights for Nature, for Humans and Nature, and United Actions for a Just and Regenerative Future. I'm Cheryl Davila, the founder of the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force and a former council member in the city of Berkeley. I'm part of the Equity Summit I helped found, as well as Mobilize Berkeley. And Mobilize Berkeley is UC Berkeley Student Environmental Resource Center and CEMTF. And I'm on the advisory council for Alameda County um, Interfaith Council and the network of elected officials and staff. And Friends of Adeline, an organization that's a community organization. And then recently, or it's been a little while, I guess it's a year now, I've been on the KPFA local station board. And if that wasn't enough, now my sister and I, and this other woman, Akila, are on Women's Voices on KPFZ in Clear Lake, California, up in Lake County. So you can tune into that too, kpfc.org. And so we're here today. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank the Planning and Logistics Committee for being here, and for Jack and Karina and myself, and for our new members, Natalie and Karis. And then we're so grateful that we have this year again, UC Berkeley Fellows that are going to be helping us. Might do a revision of the Alameda County scorecard, which you might be familiar with. And I want to thank all the speakers, Karina, Elise, Cheryl, Michaela, Javanka, Mary Beth, Reverend Dr. Smith, Lujane, and Chandra. And I want to thank you all for your donations. And if you haven't done that, there's still time. We're in our 5th year, and I'm so excited about that. We're going to be doing some great things this year, and I look forward to the future. But we're here today to hear about climate and health. And so, what is health? I know our speakers will probably address this, but I looked it up and it's like health is a state of being free of illness or injury. The World Health Organization defines health is a state of complete physical, mental, social well-being, not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. Um, and that's what they said in 1948. And in 86, they further clarified as a resource of everyday life, not the objective of living. Health is a positive concept, emphasizing social, personal resources as well as physical capacities. Many ways to look at health you can talk about. I saw this acronym, health, as an acronym from somewhere on the internet, and it was like the H stands for happiness, E for enlightenment, A for autonomy, L for learning, T for transformation, and H is for healing. And we need so much healing right now because we're in a heap of trouble, as I always say, and the heap keeps getting larger and larger. You know, we have these fires, we have rain, unexpected tornadoes, assassination attempts. The violence of police is still going on, recalls, women's rights, Zionism, fascism, and it's all here. And it's the heap is larger. And that, let's not forget, we're still in COVID. So, and the homeless, and now the criminalization of being homeless, and the mental health, and all the, substance abuse issues, and the military, the wars and the genocide, what's happening in Congo, Sudan, Haiti. There's just so much, so much, so much. And all those things impact our health. So ponder all that for a minute and get your coffee, get your tea while we listen to our amazing speakers, get some water, and we're going to start with climate and health right now. And one of our amazing fellows, Annie, is going to introduce our first speakers. So thank you, Annie.
Hi, thanks everybody. Oh, there's a truck outside my window. Sorry if you can hear that. But our first speaker is Elise Wallace, who has a master's in public health and is a manager of health partnerships at American Lung Association.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Annie, for that wonderful introduction. It's such a pleasure to be with you all today and be a part of this summit. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some information about air pollution, climate change, and health, as well as some opportunities for folks on the call to engage in the American Lung Association's clean air advocacy work. So during my presentation today, I will be spending a lot of time talking about our State of the Air report. And for folks who aren't familiar with this American Lung Association report, it is a report that is looking at the national air quality for our country, and it puts air pollution into everyday language and gives the public local information about their air quality. This report was first published in the year 2000, and so this year's report that was released back in April was our 25th edition of the report. And the report's longevity and credibility have made it a nationally recognized and a respected resource. And so in the report, we focus our attention on two of the most widespread and harmful types of air pollution: particle pollution and ozone pollution. In the report, we give grades to 885 of the 911 counties with air quality monitors in the United States. And we rank the 25 metro areas with the worst pollution, as well as the 25 with the cleanest pollution for the 3 pollutants that we look at in the report. So first, I want to talk a little bit about particle pollution before we get into the report findings as well as ozone pollution. So particle pollution is a mixture of tiny and solid and liquid particles, which is sometimes referred to as soot, and it's also sometimes called particulate matter. And so some of these particles are so small that they are not visible to the naked eye. And as you can see here in this illustration on the slide, that these particles are much smaller than a strand of human hair or a grain of fine beach sand. And so these particles can be so fine that they get trapped in the lungs and can pass through the lungs into the bloodstream. Particle pollution comes from many different sources, including factories, power plants, diesel and gasoline powered vehicles, as well as wildfires. So moving on to ozone pollution. So ozone is a colorless, odorless gas that forms most on hot sunny days and is sometimes referred to as smog. So ozone forms in the atmosphere through a chemical reaction of the pollutants, nitrogen oxides, and volatile organic compounds. Sometimes those are referred to as NOx or VOCs in the presence of heat and sunlight. And NOx and VOCs are primarily produced when fossil fuels such as gasoline, diesel, oil, natural gas, and coal are burned. And they can also be produced when solvents and some other chemicals evaporate. So at the Lung Association, we champion clean air for all because ozone and particle pollution can harm children and adults at every stage of life and across multiple systems of the body, not just respiratory. So as you can see on the slide here, there are a number of different severe health issues related to breathing polluted air. Some of these include wheezing and coughing, asthma attacks, worsening COPD, as well as premature death and increased susceptibility to infections. At the Lung Association, we also call attention through our report to the millions of people who are at risk because of the air quality in their communities. And some of the groups that are most vulnerable to air pollution include children, anyone 65 or older, and people with existing lung diseases such as asthma and COPD, just to name a few of those groups. So now I want to talk a little bit about what we found in this year's report. So in spite of the progress that's been made in the 50 plus years since the passage of the Clean Air Act, we still see that there are way too many people in our country breathing unhealthy air. And in the report, we saw that nearly 4 in 10 people live in places with unhealthy levels of air pollution, and that's about 131 million people. And specifically, we saw that people of color were 2.3 times as likely as white people to live in a county with 3 failing grades. So now moving on to ozone. So although there have been exceptions, ozone pollution, I'm happy to say, has generally improved across the country over time. Unfortunately, it remains the most widespread pollutant that we track in our report, and it still impacts the health of way too many people today. And over 100 million people, which is about 3 in 10 people in the United States, live in counties with unhealthy levels of ozone smog. So now I'd like to touch on year-round particle pollution. So after more than a decade of advocacy efforts by the American Lung Association and our partners, this past February, the US EPA finally strengthened a standard what's considered unhealthy for year-round particle pollution exposure. And as a result, in our report this year, we saw that a lot more people live in counties with a failing grade for air pollution. Looking nationally, we saw that the level of annual particle pollution only worsened slightly, but some of those most polluted cities saw their worst levels ever. And the large increase in the number of people and places getting failing grades this year has to do with the fact that these places probably had unhealthy air for many years, but because we have that stronger standard now in place, that allows us to more accurately convey the risk to those people's health from the air that they're breathing. And in this year's report, we saw that particle pollution is getting worse. This year, 65 million people lived in counties that got an F grade for short-term spikes in particle pollution. And this is an increase of more than 1 million people since last year's State of the Air report. And it's more people in total than in any of the last 13 years of the report. Unfortunately, we are seeing that the worst is getting worse. More cities on our 25 most polluted list got worse than got better. And 7 of those cities had their highest number of days ever in our reporting. The other thing I want to point out here is that all of the most polluted cities in the nation for short-term particle pollution are in the Western United States. So now focusing a little bit on climate change. I know that we could talk about this for much more than 15 minutes and the duration of this presentation, but I do want to talk about the fact that climate change is making the job of cleaning up the air more difficult. And that has to do with the fact that extreme heat, drought, and wildfires are adding to our everyday pollution burdens, and they are threatening our clean air progress. Specifically, rising temperatures associated with climate change contribute to not only increased ozone pollution, but also more frequent and intense wildfires, and that smoke can spread hundreds of miles away. At the Lung Association, we regularly talk about how climate change is a health emergency. And like I said, unfortunately, climate change is challenging all these gains that we've been able to make through the Clean Air Act. And specifically here, I want to talk a little bit about wildfires and something that we saw in this year's report. So wildfires are not only increasing the number of days and places with unhealthy spikes of particle pollution, but they're also increasing the severity of that pollution, which is resulting, as you can see here in the graph, in the sharp increase over the last several reports of the number of days designated as either purple or maroon on the air quality index. So as you can see, that jump, it's been happening, but it really kind of jumped in 2021. And these very unhealthy and hazardous days are a serious health threat to everyone living in those areas, and they're unlike anything we've ever seen in the history of this report. And this year, over 32 million people in 58 counties across 10 states experienced purple or maroon days for daily particle pollution. And this is unfortunately an alarming trend that is likely to continue as climate change worsens. So now I want to take a look at what we saw this year for California. So while we have made so much meaningful progress in our state to clean up our air, we do still have a ways to go. And in this year's report, we saw that 98% of Californians live in a county with at least one failing grade, and that's about 38 million people. And 81% of Californians live in a county with at least 3 failing grades. And as I said at the beginning of the presentation, in our report, we look at the top 10 worst metro areas for pollution as well as cleanest. And so today I'm just going to show you those top 10 lists for the worst, the most polluted cities. And so I know that a lot of folks on the call are based in the Bay Area. So wanted to let you know that on this list, this is the top 10 most polluted cities list for ozone. The Bay Area, so that's the San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland metro area, ranked number 18. So it was not in the top 10, but it was in the top 25. And as you can see, you're going to see it on all 3 lists, but we do have a lot of California cities on these on these lists. And this is our top 10 most polluted cities for annual particle pollution. And on here, the Bay Area ranks number 5 on that list. Bakersfield is in the top spot, and we've seen this in many years of our report. And like I said, again, there's a lot of California cities on this list. And then moving to short-term particle pollution, we see here that San Jose, San Francisco, and Oakland, a metro area, was number 7 on this list. And unfortunately, I'm not able to get into the specifics of the county level information for the Bay Area, just given the time today, but really want to encourage everyone on the call to read more about our report and learn more about the air quality in your area. I think this is something I'm so passionate about at the Lung Association, is really learning more about your air quality and then learning about ways to empower yourself and your loved ones to take precautions if the air quality is bad in your area on a particular day. But so I will put a link in the chat to our report after I finish the last couple of slides. So finally, as I wrap up, I want to highlight a couple of opportunities for folks to get involved in our advocacy work. And the first one is a petition that we are circulating, which is calling on Governor Newsom to veto any bills that interfere with our clean air progress. And unfortunately, there are a couple of bills right now that, a few bills, excuse me, that we're concerned about that undermine some of the great work that we've done around curbing pollution from trucks and boats. And so, like I said, after the presentation, I will drop a link into the chat for this petition and welcome you to join us on this. And so at the Lung Association, I focus a lot of my time on specifically working with health professionals and health organizations and highlighting the health harms of air pollution and climate change. And so this is one of our groups and initiatives at the Lung Association, Health Professionals for Clean Air and Climate Action. And we have a monthly newsletter with updates on climate and health news, as well as opportunities to take action. And there's also opportunities to share why climate action is important to you on our website by sharing your story. And I will put more information about that in the chat as well. So that concludes my presentation for today. Thank you again for this opportunity to speak with you all, and I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Elise. Although that was a lot of bad news for the Bay Area, unfortunately, right? But does anybody have any questions? Please raise your hand. I mean, I appreciate all the work that you do and making us aware because, you know, we don't know. I just realized Wednesday we kicked off Climate and Health with Dr. Jeff Mann, who's with Climate Health Now. And I didn't realize that when you cook, that creates particulate matter. And I was like, oh, no. I didn't realize that, you know, I mean, it makes sense, but you don't put two and two together in that way, There is a hand raised. So go ahead, unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, Elise. Thanks. That was a great talk. And I'm curious, how do you think that improving our public transit in big cities would impact local and maybe even regional air quality issues?
That's a great question. This is something that the Lung Association is a strong advocate for, advocating not only for zero emission transportation, but also specifically active transportation, public transportation. At the Lung Association, we advocate for EVs, but we also recognize that public transportation is so essential. And so I do think that that's a really important piece of cleaning up our transportation sector. And something at the Lung Association, we are very focused on transportation in part because that sector is the largest sector of greenhouse gas emissions for our state. And so really appreciate you raising that issue. And so I think cleaning up our public transit and active transportation as well is really important to cleaner air.
Thank you for that question. Does anybody else have another question? Please raise your hand. We actually have 3 minutes. That's amazing. I see another hand raised. Go ahead.
Hi, so you were talking about advocating for higher standards and like the EPA finally listening. How does the American Lung Association interact with governing bodies and NGOs? And what does advocating look like on your part?
Good question.
That's a really good question. So we have staff at the national and state level that are working on clean air issues. So our national team is primarily the folks on our team that work with US EPA, and that looks like a lot of different things. So one of the things that we do is organize health groups and submit sign-on letters with different organizations that are signed on to let EPA know, some of the stances that we have as an organization. So what I mentioned earlier about that EPA standard, that's something that we spent a lot of time and energy organizing health partners and health organizations, as well as the public on, and really letting EPA know that we need stronger standards to clean up particle pollution. And so the health group letters is one way, petitions is another way. And we also will provide testimony at hearings to EPA and at the state level as well, so that we can weigh in on different topics and speak about the health harms and the health benefits of some of the rules that they are looking at. And then I want to say too, here in California, we do things that are similar to that, but in terms of other advocacy activities, we'll meet with policymakers as well, one-on-one, and elected officials to share information about some of the regulations that we're working on. And similarly, we'll circulate petitions and health group letters. So it's a lot of the same types of things, but we have different folks working in California, in other states, and then at our national level.
Great. Thank you. I know, like, since COVID, I now have asthma. So I'm very conscious of the air lately. It's been a couple of years since I had it. I only had it once, knock on wood. But it's just, I wish people would stop burning fires and stop barbecuing. So that's my ask for everyone on this call, because it's really hard when you're walking and you're enjoying the nature and then you get so anyway, and I have an electric car now, so I'm doing my part. So yeah. So thank you. That was just a lot of great information. It makes us very aware of what's going down the pipelines in our bodies. So thank you for that. And thank you for all the work that you do. This is my first time ever hearing from the American Lung Association. So I really appreciate it. So thank you. And and thank you for being so on time with everything as well. So thank you. And so now we're gonna hear from our next speakers, and Safia, our UC Berkeley Fellow, will introduce the next speaker. Thank you.
Sophia's actually having some technical issues, so I'm going to introduce for her. Just a moment. So this is the monitoring for clarity and detecting harmful blooms in San Francisco Bay, and I'm introducing Cheryl Patel, field and investigator and community science coordinator of San Francisco, as well as Michaela Marquez, also in field investigator outreach team and San Francisco Baykeeper.
Thank you. So thank you. I think that was Nisa, right? All right. So Jack, you can not highlight me, please.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm gonna share my screen, so give me just 1 second here. Okay, so hi everyone. As Nisa said, my name is Cheryl Patel. I am with San Francisco Baykeeper as their field investigator and community science coordinator.
Hi, I'm Michaela Marquez. I'm a field investigator and part of the outreach team at Baykeeper.
And so we're going to be presenting together today, and we want to just say a quick, big thank you for Cheryl and all the organizers for having us today and putting on this summit. And we'll be going over monitoring for harmful algal blooms in San Francisco Bay. So before we get into it, just a quick overview of what we'll be discussing. So first we'll talk about who San Francisco Baykeeper is in case you have not heard of us before. We'll get into a brief intro about harmful algal blooms, or HABs, as I may refer to them from here on out as their acronym. We'll talk about and discuss more about the Baykeepers Community Science Program that recently started this summer. And we'll talk more about HABs in San Francisco Bay and what we find there. Then we'll touch a little bit about harmful algal blooms and as they relate to public health. And then we'll get into freshwater HABs as they relate to our Delta region. And finally, we'll talk a little bit about how harmful algal blooms are connected to climate change. And if we have time at the end, we'll have some open time for questions, hopefully. So to start off, we are part of San Francisco Baykeeper. And if you have heard of us before, I'm really curious and like to know. So please let me know in the chat if you've heard of us before. But for those of you who have not heard of us, we are a nonprofit organization that has been operating in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 35 years now. And what we do is defend San Francisco Bay from the biggest threats, including industrial pollution. And we aim to create healthier communities and help wildlife thrive in this region. And what we do is we actively investigate pollution, we strengthen regulations, and we enforce environmental laws on behalf of the public. And so San Francisco Baykeeper, along with a lot of other agencies around the SF Bay, we've been concerned about harmful algal blooms because these blooms, they can have a really huge negative impact on the bay's ecosystem and our communities here. But what exactly are harmful algal blooms, right? So let's dive in a little bit to those details. So I say harmful algal or harmful algae, and when I say that, I'm talking about the microscopic single-celled algae called phytoplankton. So phytoplankton, they need sunlight and nutrients to grow, just like terrestrial plants do. And these phytoplankton are found worldwide in freshwater and marine environments. And as you can see from this image here, there's a huge diversity in the phytoplankton from shapes and sizes as well. Now, generally, phytoplankton actually play a really critical role in ecosystem function. For example, phytoplankton are the base of every aquatic food web on Earth, so they play an important role in transferring energy up the food chain. Phytoplankton are also creating oxygen for us, and specifically a group of phytoplankton called diatoms, and here is an example of a diatom. They produce a significant portion of our Earth's oxygen through photosynthesis. And finally, another critical function that phytoplankton perform is carbon sequestration. So they naturally store carbon away deep down into the deep ocean. And that is especially important as we continue to burn fossil fuels and release excess carbon dioxide into our atmosphere. So with that all being said, what exactly makes harmful algae harmful, right? So a phytoplankton species, they will bloom when they grow out of control and kind of turn into this big kind of mess. And you can see a photo of a bloom here in Lake Erie. That's kind of what a really big bloom would look like from a satellite image. And a bloom can be harmful if the species that's blooming produces a toxin, and that toxin is then released in excess amounts into the environment and the aquatic environment. But even if a bloom species doesn't produce toxins, when all those phytoplankton cells eventually die from that bloom, that can then lead to a dangerously low oxygen levels in that aquatic environment, which can cause fish kills because those fish don't have the oxygen they need in that water. Now, we can't completely stop or eliminate harmful algal blooms from happening. But what we can do is learn about these blooms and try to lessen the chance of frequent blooms from occurring. And a key tool to do that is actually monitoring. So you may remember that in the summers of 2022 and 2023, a pretty big harmful algal bloom developed in San Francisco Bay, both of those summers. And both times, San Francisco Baykeeper was one of the first to respond to those blooms. So we got out there and we were able to get samples early on during that bloom. And that way we learned that the blooming organism was a species called Heterosigma akashiwo. And through our experiences during those 2 summers, we learned that shoreline monitoring was really beneficial for detecting harmful algal blooms early, because the boats that typically do this type of monitoring in the bay, they aren't able to cover the shallower shoreline locations where harmful algal blooms tend to develop in the early stages of a bloom. So as a result, Baykeeper has started a community science program that monitors for harmful algal blooms along San Francisco Bay shorelines. Now, this community science program, it exists within a larger project, which is meant to monitor and respond to harmful algal bloom events in San Francisco Bay. And the acronym for that larger project is MIRHAB. So if I say MIRHAB, that's what I'm referring to. Now, Baykeeper's program's goal is to develop a sustainable San Francisco Bay harmful algal bloom monitoring network of community scientists. And these community scientists can help us detect the harmful algal blooms early, plus they can collect data during a bloom should one occur. Now, Baykeeper is running this program in close partnership with San Francisco Estuary Institute and U.S. Geological Survey through a National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration grant, or a NOAA grant. And these partner agencies are doing some amazing complementary work with our monitoring program. They are monitoring for HABs using molecular techniques. They're using satellite imagery and high-resolution remote sensing. And some of them are even developing new methods to test algae toxins in shellfish. Now, Baykeeper is also partnered with NOAA's Phytoplankton Monitoring Network. This is a national network of community scientists collecting phytoplankton and harmful algal bloom data around the country. And we are using their standard sampling protocol so that we don't have to reinvent the wheel, and we can upload our data to their national database. And so what our volunteer community scientists do is they head out to a specific location around the San Francisco Bay, and they follow our field protocol to collect phytoplankton samples and environmental data. And then they can get to a microscope and do a sample analysis, which involves identifying phytoplankton and collecting data, which is then entered into the database. And so this past summer, we just ran our pilot season where we got to learn a lot about our program and how we can improve for next year. And we did a pretty good job with our volunteers doing a lot of great work for us. And so next year, we're going to start off by training our volunteers in the springtime to identify phytoplankton and use our sampling protocol. And then we will continue to do weekly sampling from June through September. And if anyone has any questions or is interested in volunteering or just wants to know more, you're welcome to contact Michaela and I. Our emails will be on the slide at the end of the presentation, or we'll also put in the chat if you want. And so our volunteers, what are they looking for when they're doing the sample analysis? Well, they are searching for specific phytoplankton that are known to produce harmful toxins or contribute to fish kills. And our list focuses on harmful species that are typically found in the San Francisco Bay. And so this summer, we saw a lot of these species from our list, including phytoplankton like Catastris, Noctiluca, Dinophysis, and Alexandrium, which are all pictured here. And we've also seen that there's specific hotspots for harmful algal blooms to develop in our Bay Area. And as we continue this program through the next few years, we'll probably even identify a few more. But for now, we know that blooms tend to develop in places like the Oakland Estuary, Redwood City, and Foster City, Alameda's Seaplane Lagoon, and the shoreline from Alameda down to Hayward. And when we do see a bloom, what we do is we report that to NOAA's phytoplankton monitoring network so that it can be recorded in the national database. But we also bring a sample of that bloom to our partners at California Department of Public Health so that their experts can help us confirm the blooming species. And once we can confirm that species, that can help us determine if the bloom is potentially toxic and what level of impact we should expect from that bloom. And CDPH also monitors for harmful algal blooms, but their focus is more specifically on two major toxin-producing phytoplankton that can have impact on shellfish populations in our bay and on our coast. And I'm going to let Michaela talk more about that in depth here.
Thanks, Cheryl. So yeah, now that we've covered how HABs affect ecosystem health, I'll talk a little bit more about how they can adversely affect public health. So some species of phytoplankton produce toxins that can harm both humans as well as pets. So like Cheryl discussed, Pseudonychia is a species that produces a neurotoxin called domoic acid, which if ingested, this toxin can cause amnesic shellfish poisoning, which has symptoms that can typically present within 24 hours of ingestion. So some of these symptoms could be abdominal cramps, vomiting, or nausea. And a few years ago, people at the Marine Mammal Center actually discovered that sea lions were an indicator of Pseudonychia blooms. The way they found this out was that they would see that sea lions were presenting with odd symptoms such as disorientation and erratic behavior, and they were able to trace these symptoms back to the fish the sea lions were eating, which had large amounts of this phytoplankton Pseudonychia in them. So this is a good example of biomagnification through the food chain, meaning that the small fish consumed the phytoplankton Pseudonychia, and then the sea lions consumed large amounts of fish, which had high enough concentrations of domoic acid to negatively affect them. Now, this is a bad thing for the sea lions, but one scientist at the center discovered this. It helped them be able to alert the right people to monitor the blooms. So that was a good thing. Next slide. Another example of a species that produces a neurotoxin is Alexandrium. There's a picture here. If ingested through recreation in the water or consumption of shellfish that is harvested when there's an active bloom, this species can cause paralytic shellfish poisoning, which is something that unfortunately even cooked or frozen shellfish can still have this toxin. And some of the symptoms that you might experience if you ingest this is tingling in the lips and tongue, which usually have symptoms that are pretty quickly onset within minutes to hours. Yeah, next slide. So now moving on to freshwater, I'll be discussing cyanobacteria, which is a type of bacteria that's present in freshwater, commonly found in our delta. So when blooms happen, they create hypoxic zones, meaning that there are zones with very low levels of oxygen. Microcystis is a type of species of cyanobacteria that commonly blooms in our delta region. And if this is ingested through recreation or swimming in the water, symptoms like skin rash, gastrointestinal issues, and upper respiratory issues, irritation can occur. So typically it's pretty smart if you see cloudy water or water that's unusually pigmented, not to recreate there. It could be indication that there's a bloom happening. Next slide. So now that I've discussed a little bit about the public health threats to and relation to HABs, I'm going to go shift to the connection between HABs and climate change. So as we see global temperatures continuing to increase, the typical bloom window for HABs is extending. So the classic kind of typical window is summer, but we're seeing it extend now into the later fall months. And another climate connection is ocean acidification. So a quick little overview of that. As the pH continues to decline due to ocean acidification, there's an increase in dissolved CO2. So that creates great conditions for algae to bloom because they need CO2. Next slide. So with the amount of atmospheric CO2 increasing as well, there's a higher frequency of blooms. And that's because, like I mentioned, algae use CO2 as a carbon source for photosynthesis. So when there's that excess, that's creating good conditions for them to bloom. And the last connection I'll make is talking about changing wind patterns. So wind also plays a factor in harmful algae blooms, and that's because when there's less wind or surface wind on the water, there's more stratification, meaning that there are distinct water layers divided by density, and still water is what phytoplankton loves to bloom in. So when there's that still water or that still layer of water on top, that's creating great conditions for blooms. Now, as I've discussed, next slide. As I've discussed, climate change does play a role in the conditions that promote harmful algal blooms, which is why it's important for Baykeeper and other entities to continue to monitor, and especially important for Baykeeper to continue to build our MIRHAB community science program so that we can detect blooms early on. Now, algal blooms are not the only thing that Baykeeper does, it's only a piece. I wanted to leave you all with a few things that you can only say about Baykeeper. So at Baykeeper, we are the only group that patrols regularly for pollution in the bay. We use a unique combination of law, science, and advocacy in-house to defend the bay, and we have 30+ years of victories. Like Cheryl mentioned, we're very excited to be celebrating our 35th anniversary this year and continuing to investigate pollution in the bay and protect all of our waterways here. With that, I'd like to thank everyone. As Cheryl mentioned, please feel free to contact us if you're interested in getting involved in our MIRHAB monitoring program, or visit our website, baykeeper.org, if you'd like to learn about more of the cases we've taken on, our victories, or just more about our work in general. And now I'd like to open up the floor for questions if anyone has any.
Thank you so much. That was amazing. Thank you, Cheryl, with the C. Yay. And thank you, Michaela. That was amazing. And what a beautiful little picture. I was so happy I saw a seal. I was at Fort Mason, and I parked in the lot, and I'm walking past the water, and I was like, what's that thing in the water? And then it poked its head up as if it was to say, here I am, it's me. I was so excited. But my husband didn't see it. I was the only one. So it was great though. Go ahead, Karina, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I was wondering, does the runoff from wastewater also contribute to it, that blooms?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Yes, so wastewater treatment plants, when they are releasing their cleaned water, a lot of the time that water that's being released, it has a lot of excess nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus. And the amounts that are released is actually governed by a permit. And thankfully, Baykeeper has worked really hard for the past few years to actually update the wastewater treatment permit for nutrients. And recently, we've got the regional board to reduce or increase that level to, decrease the level of nutrients allowed to be released to about 40%. So we've been working with that as a way to combat HABs because, yes, excess nutrients from wastewater treatment plants and other sources like agricultural runoff do contribute to the nutrients that these blooms use to have good conditions and kind of get out of control.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I see that Pilar has her hand up.
Yeah, I actually have a couple questions. One is I read on your website that the waste treatment is like 65% responsible wastewater for the, I guess, excess nutrients that add to the blooms. I was wondering, and you mentioned doing some work, and and it specifically says San Francisco wastewater treatment and East Bay mud, of course. So I'd love to know how we can support and learn more about any actions that are happening in regard to those wastewater management treatment facilities and organizations. And also I had a separate question, which was, you know, we in Berkeley specifically, that we have aquatic park, which I drive by fairly consistently because it's actually a really great way to avoid a chunk of traffic. So you can kind of get off the freeway and then, anyway, I'm not going to reveal all the secrets, but you basically drive right over it and you can see the blooms pretty consistently. And so I was just wondering if you have any more specific information that you'd be willing to share about that. If there's any, like, you know, I would be interested in any monitoring information. And we've heard from, you know, some community partners who have facilities right next to aquatic park that they notice, you know, intense die-off on occasion in there. So I'd love any resources or information you could share. Thank you.
Those are really great questions. Thank you. So I'll say in terms of the excess nutrients into our bay and how we can combat that is, one, Baykeeper puts out action alerts, which people in the community can sign on to, and that's one way to stay in touch with what's happening. You can also join our newsletter. I think it's, Michaela, correct me if I'm incorrect, but I think it's either monthly that you'll get an email to get an update on what we've been working on in terms of excess nutrients and our other ways that we combat pollution. And then when it comes to like aquatic park, for example, or Lake Merritt, for example, which we know had some major fish kills recently. Yes, blooms happen in those more smaller, sedentary kind of still water areas. Those are really good conditions for a bloom to kind of develop, unfortunately. And I think from the extent of my knowledge, most of those places are run by the specific city which kind of has developed them. But the connection there is, if that body of water like Lake Merritt or aquatic park, if it's connected to the bay, that those bloom organisms can get into the bay, and that could lead to a larger issue. So it's definitely something to pay attention to. And in terms of how we can pay attention to that monitoring, I think I don't have all the resources off the top of my head at the moment. Michaela, let me know if you have anything off the top of your head, but feel free to contact us, send us an email, and we can continue this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm afraid we're out of time, but Kelly, I see that you had your hand raised. If you could do it in like 2 seconds, that would be great.
Okay.
Maybe not. Oh,
I'll just
go
make
ahead.
it real quick. Have you been following the San Francisco case against the EPA that's just been taken up by the Supreme Court?
Yes, we have. We're very closely following that. We're one of the people who are on that case. SF Baykeeper started that case with SFPUC.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for this presentation. It was really great. I really learned a lot. And I love your background too, Cheryl. I hope to hear from you again. We'll probably have you come back because I'm sure things change from time to time. Yeah. So thank you so much. And now we're going to move on to our next fabulous guest, Fatima is going to introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. So our next section is climate and mental health, and our speaker is Jovanka Beckles. She has an MBA, board member director, as well as a mental health specialist, and she's with the Alameda County Transit.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Fatima. Thank you, Cheryl. Y'all, I'm just wondering if we can give, Cheryl a virtual hand clap, because this is wonderful. This is fabulous. This is absolutely needed. I just, when you think you kind of know a lot, just when you think okay, I know all there is to know about, climate and environmental issues and all of the challenges that we are faced with regard to climate change. Then, Cheryl, you put this on, and there's still so much more for us to learn. And I think that is the beauty of humanity, right? The beauty of humanity is that no matter how old we are, it's never too late to learn. And no matter how smart we are, there's always information that we can use, and that just expands our knowledge of everything that we think we know. So Baykeepers, I really appreciate all the work that you all have done. I know I apologize, I may have missed a couple before that, but just I'm familiar with the work that you all do, and it's such invaluable work. My most recent memory is the last fundraiser that you all were able to have, and my wife and I got to stand in front of the cute little seal and take a picture with our glass of wine. And anyway, it just the fact that you all are able to do what you're doing with so much volunteer base is really phenomenal. And so I thank you all. I thank all of your volunteer scientists who love this planet and really want to see our planet thrive. So thank you, Cheryl, for the invitation. Javanka Beckles, she, her pronouns. Yeah, as Fatima said, that I have worked as a mental health professional for 34 years, and 11 of those years with adults, 23 of those years with children, children and families, specifically doing mentoring and wraparound services. And the thing about wraparound service is it's a holistic approach to increasing the quality of life for families, children and families. So children are having challenges. They can, their teachers tend to be the ones who refer them to wraparound services. And we have all of the providers in the child's life. We literally sit around a table. During COVID, we virtually sat around a table to develop a goal for improvement, to heal the child. But we all know that if it's not enough to simply heal a child, you have to heal the whole family, because if a child, no matter how much good work you can do, they still have to go home, right? They still have to go to their community. So it's important that we heal not just the child, but the whole family. And as an activist, playing my role to heal the community as well. So that's what it's going to take, and some of you are probably wondering, well, what is the connection between mental health and just the environmental, crisis that we face? Well, we're talking about a holistic approach to healing not just human beings, but a holistic approach to healing, our planet, right? To healing our communities. I appreciate the fact that we know that to heal children, to heal families, to heal communities, it takes all of us. It takes all of us. And I see, 30 people at least on this call alone. This is being recorded, so we know that there are going to be so many more who are gonna listen, watch. And so that's what this is about. This is about a holistic approach to healing our planet, to healing ourselves, because as we know, those of you who have flown, I'm sure most of us have at least been on a plane at least once, maybe, right? Everybody's been on a plane at least once. And we hear every time we get on a plane, what is the one consistent message that we hear when the plane is about to take off? We're always instructed, if you are with a child, you have to give yourself oxygen first before you can care for your child or the other person that you're with, right? Particularly talking about children. And so the importance of healing the planet, healing ourselves, we have to take care of ourselves first, because if we're not around, it's like as in the this analogy of the plane, if we're not around, our child's going to die because we weren't able to take care of ourselves first before taking care of the ones we love. And so in caring for ourselves, it's so important that we seek out the different avenues, the different support systems that we have, because this is it can be depressing. Let's be real here. We wake up every day to some new devastation happening around our planet, around the world. It's burning. This fire is out of control. This fire is out of control. This fire, killed 81 people. This fire killed 100 and certain people. You know, mudslides, unprecedented amounts of hurricane season lasting longer, tornado season lasting longer. And I tell you all, the fact that we even have in California that blows my mind and can be quite depressing is the fact that newscasters now deem a certain months of the year in California as fire season. That is not a season. That's not a season. Fire is not a season. Fire that we are seeing during certain times after long, hot days throughout the summer is not a season. It's an illness. It's an illness to our planet, and it can be so absolutely depressing. And so, well, what do we do? Do we just stay in bed like I want to do so many days? I just want to stay in bed, curled up under a sheet with my pillow, right? So many of us probably want to do that. But I can tell you what works, what helps. What helps me to get out of bed every day feeling hopeful is activism, is doing something, doing our part to avert climate catastrophe, doing my part. And sometimes it can seem, little things can seem so, let's see, the word I'm looking for is hopeless, I suppose, for lack of a better word. Right, can seem so minor and trivial, like separating my my trash, separating my compost from my recyclables, little things like that. So when I'm talking about my mental health, our mental health, even the smallest little things can make a difference. I would dare say that I bet you those scientists that are volunteering to ensure that our water is safe and clean because it affects the whole ecosystem, right? The whole ecological system. Those scientists that are volunteering every day could be doing so much more, but I know that it has to do with two things: keeping themselves sane, right? Keeping themselves healthy, mentally, emotionally, and physically healthy, because our whole body, our whole being, it's all connected. And just like our mind is connected to our body and vice versa, our body's connected to our minds, so are we connected to each other, so are we connected to the planet. And so doing something every day, even little things, can make a difference with regard to our emotional, our mental health, and how we're able to address, what we see on a daily basis, what we're bombarded with from the news and social media on a daily basis. So, several things I've already mentioned one. Definitely, there's nothing weak about seeking mental health support through a therapist, through psychiatrists, through psychologists. There is nothing weak about that. In fact, it's necessary. In fact, I tell people, those of us in the mental health profession, we have therapists, right? Psychologists, psychiatrists, those are the doctors who prescribe a mental health medications. They have therapists. We all need it to be able to keep our minds healthy. So there's that. There's professional support, right? But then there's also, our what we call informal support system. Our informal support systems, that's people around us, right? That's our partners, our spouses, right? That's our neighbors. That's family, that's friends that you can just send a silly, cat video to, right? Or something. There's those type of informal support systems. There's doing things that make you laugh. And I would advise, before you go to bed, because we are so bombarded on a daily basis all day long sometimes. I would challenge all of us on this call. Don't go to sleep without laughter, without getting something to make you laugh, right? If it's a comedian on TV on one of the platforms, so Netflix or Hulu or whatever that may be, just do something to make yourself laugh before you go to bed, because sleep is important to our whole being. Rest is important to our whole being. And I tell you what, it's really hard to sleep when your mind has so much that we want to do and can't necessarily do within a 12-hour timeline, and the 24-hour timeline. At least 8 of those hours you should be devoted to rest and sleep. Drinking lots of water is good for our emotional and our well-being. So y'all, I can go on and on and on, as many of you know. But when it comes to doing our part to ensure that we have a future, we have a planet to have a future, we have to be sure to take care of ourselves, our emotional and our physical being. And that means, in order for us to be able to do this work, right, of saving our planet and making sure that our planet is healthy. So our planet can be healthy when we are healthy individuals. And when we have healthy individuals, we have a healthy planet. When we have a healthy planet, we have a healthy future. When we have a healthy future, that creates hope. And I hope that we can all hold on to hope every single day. Thank you all. Any questions? Just even comments, y'all. This is an opportunity to comment, because I know we're all doing this work. It's hard. It's hard work. And we have to take care of ourselves, our whole being, mental and physical being. So yeah, I don't know, Cheryl, how much time you have for that, but y'all, this is an opportunity to just, let it out. How are you feeling? How are you feeling emotionally, y'all?
We have a hand raised. Go ahead, Willie.
You can actually see my name.
I see your name, but I don't see your face.
I can't even see myself on this.
We can't either.
This Zoom.
We see
I don't know
black
what it
screen.
is, but I cannot see myself. So it's interesting.
What's your question?
That other people can see me, but I wanted to commend both of you side by side. I can see you in terms of the work that you have done over the course of time. And I know that one of the things that comes with this work is burnout.
Yes, exactly.
I've seen it. I've seen it with you, Cheryl. And that's important to realize what you just said, Javanka, that you need to take care of yourself first.
Yes.
So that you can take care of other people.
Yes.
So I am advising this young man who works for East Bay Community Law Center basically not to get burned out, because you can't do anything if you're burned out.
That's right.
And being able to be aware of that is very important, because other people can see it. You get a little feisty at times, you get irritable, you might get a little sensitive in terms of issues, but the very fact is we all have it. And if I get burned out, Cheryl, please remind me to step back.
All right, great. Thank you, Willie.
But
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Jovanka. That was amazing. We all need our mental health to be intact to
Yes.
have our future.
Yes.
And one thing I forgot to say earlier, because today is my husband's 70th birthday. So I want to give a shout out to my husband.
All
Happy
right.
birthday. I meant to say that in my beginning remarks, but I forgot. So
Yes,
thank you,
yes.
thank you, thank you, Jovanka. And so we're going to, oh, my sister has her hand raised. Lynette, go ahead. Make it quick because we're ready for our next guest.
I just wanted to say I'm so happy to see you, Jovanka, and also I think that people should find the joy.
Yes.
There's so much joy in
Yes.
everything, and unfortunately, I was in New York at 911, and I saw the devastation. I went to the hall. One of my college friends died, but that taught me to. I mean, I could imagine him having one hand on the computer, next hand with God. But
Yes,
what happened was, I enjoy every blade of grass, every flower petal, every leaf on a tree, every bird, even the stupid ants and the wasps. I have fights with them on my deck, but I found a way to holistically get rid of them, and they don't mint. I sprayed them with mint tea, and they did not like that. So, I mean, there's so much stuff we can do, but we got to be happy. Because if you're not happy, that just messes everything up.
That's right.
All right. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Find
you.
your joy. Yes.
And thank you, Jovanka. So next, we're going to have our next speaker. I have to figure out who's going to introduce them real quick. It's going to be Nisa. Thank you, Nisa, and thank you, Jovanka.
Thank you. And I will be introducing the climate and change mosquito-borne diseases in California. And I'm introducing Mary Beth Stanford, PhD epidemiologist of California Department of Public Health, Infectious Disease Branch, Vector-Borne Diseases. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. As introduced, I'm Dr. Mary Beth Danforth with the California Department of Public Health. I'm an epidemiologist who specializes in mosquito-borne diseases. I'm giving this presentation on behalf of my colleague, Dr. Andrea Lund, who couldn't be here today, but she is our insect-borne disease and climate change expert. So the two of us combined have put together this presentation. So I'm going to give you a brief coverage of mosquito-borne diseases in California before talking about climate change and their impacts on these diseases. We have two main categories of diseases that we monitor for at the Department of Public Health. We have West Nile and St. Louis encephalitis virus, which are transmitted in this state by endemic Culex mosquitoes. And then we also monitor travelers returning with dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, which are transmitted by invasive Aedes mosquitoes. And briefly, why is climate important for mosquito-borne diseases? Mosquitoes are insects. They're dependent upon the climate outside. They are dependent upon precipitation. They lay their eggs in water for their life cycle to begin. And then temperature drives a large part of their life. It drives how quickly they develop. It drives how often they are going to be biting people. And it drives how quickly virus will replicate in them. West Nile virus is the biggest arboviral threat in California. As I said, it's transmitted by endemic Culex mosquitoes. It was first detected in our state in 2003, and we've had detections every year and human cases every year since then. It is primarily transmitted in a cycle between birds and mosquitoes. These mosquitoes are found in both urban and rural areas in California. Humans, like us and horses, are what we consider to be dead end hosts. So if a mosquito bites us, we can become sick, and we can, in fact, develop neuroinvasive disease or even die from this virus. However, we never develop enough virus in our blood to reinfect another mosquito. And this primary bird cycle is a really important component for us being able to monitor this virus. So as I said, we have human cases every year since 2003. Last year we had 473, 6 of whom were fatal. So far this year in California, we only have 60 cases. However, we're right now at peak transmission, so I anticipate that number will triple by the time the year ends. However, we also have had 6 of those as fatal cases. The risk for West Nile virus is not equal across the state. We have such a broad diversity of environments, and these mosquitoes seem to prefer the Central Valley with the rural agricultural areas, and then also some urban areas, and then also in Southern California. Those of you who are residing on the coast, it's typically too cool for mosquitoes to be able to transmit the virus. So you're fortunately a little protected there. As I said, we use the mosquito and bird cycle to be able to monitor the virus. We have over 70 vector control agencies throughout the state of California. They collect mosquitoes. They collect dead birds, and they also monitor chickens. Chickens are like humans, unlike other birds. They do become ill, but they don't even become ill. They become infected. They develop antibodies, but they don't transmit it to other mosquitoes. So we can collect blood from chickens over the course of a summer and monitor when they become West Nile virus positive. The dead birds has a very important human component. California, the Department of Public Health maintains a West Nile virus dead bird call center. You can call the number on that screen or go to westnile.ca.gov. If you find a dead bird in your area and you would like it to be collected and tested by our local vector control. So far this year, we've had over 1,600 positive mosquito pools, 427 positive dead birds, and 116 positive chickens. And those numbers, like our human cases, will continue to go up, but these will taper off fairly quickly. Peak transmission was in the mosquitoes was roughly the end of August. So the vector control agencies take in the mosquito abundance and the infection rates, the sentinel chickens, dead birds, and they also factor in the daily temperature, and they assign a risk value for each of those from 1 through 5, and then take an average so that they can have an understanding of what's going on in a particular area. They look at normal season, emergency planning, and then goes up to epidemic conditions. So here you can see a map of last week for California. You can see that most of the state was following in the normal season or emergency planning, though we did technically have epidemic conditions in parts of the Southern Central Valley and a little bit in the Northern Central Valley. This dictates what they are doing. So they're going to be conducting routine activities, reducing sources, doing public education. Once it hits emergency, they will increase the amount of monitoring they do and control and increase their outreach. And then when epidemic conditions, be prepared for epidemic conditions, which includes a lot more media campaigns, physician outreach, in addition to surveillance and mosquito control. A big example of how the system works and the intersection of that with climate change was the reemergence of Tulare Lake last summer. Winter 2022-2023, with their historic rainfall, led to the reemergence of Tulare Lake, which had previously been drained for agricultural purposes. But now we suddenly had this large body of water where mosquitoes could breed, and they did in fact breed. And we had hundreds of times more mosquitoes coming off of Tulare Lake than we did originally, than we used to. However, our monitoring system alerted us to the fact that we had incredibly high numbers of mosquitoes before the virus started circulating. And so we were able to work and get extra resources down to that area to treat mosquito larval habitat to reduce them from becoming adults. And we did not, in fact, have an increase in West Nile virus transmission or human cases in that area. So we were able to respond. But we need to be prepared for more situations like this going forward. If you're interested in what's going on with West Nile virus, we have our website, westnile.ca.gov. We have a formalized risk plan, which is used by all the agencies across the state. So it's the exact same system. And if you're interested in that plan, it is available on that website. That's also where you can report a dead bird or look up the vector control agency that you live in if you have concerns about day-biting mosquitoes or standing water in your area. Next, I'm moving on to our Aedes transmitted diseases, which I want to emphasize in California, they are travel-associated diseases. In this case, I'm talking about dengue, Zika, and chikungunya, though I'll primarily focus on dengue for this presentation. They are transmitted by invasive Aedes mosquitoes. These are not native to our state. Unlike West Nile virus, humans are an important part of this cycle. This is primarily a human mosquito cycle. These are very strongly urban mosquitoes, and they are aggressive day biters. The Culex mosquitoes that do West Nile are more evening and morning, and they tend to prefer birds, hence the bird cycle, but these like people. They were introduced into California around 2011 through the Los Angeles port area, but have moved throughout Southern California and up through the Central Valley. We believe the movement is not just natural movement on them, but also the movement of people and goods. So they tend to follow the highway system. We now have 19 counties with Aedes aegypti, 5 with Aedes aegypti and albopictus. So a total of 24 counties with these mosquitoes. This is available on the VBDS website. So we do monitor dengue and returning travelers. We case counts go back to 2016. We have an average of 151 cases per year. Last year, we saw our first ever locally acquired cases of dengue. We had 2 from Los Angeles County. And so far this year, we have 3 locally acquired cases. Now, I'm going to point out that our mean is 151 per year. We are at 170 plus already. And we are only partway through our mosquito year. So that number will be probably considerably larger by the end of the year. Mosquitoes are very seasonal. And even though we don't have dengue transmission actively going on throughout the state of California, we are affected by the seasonality of it in other countries. So if people are traveling to tropical or subtropical areas where dengue is transmitted, they follow that season and they return, and that's when we get diagnosed. So right now we're kind of in peak dengue transmission in Central America and the Caribbean, and we are thus seeing an increase of cases in California. There we go. Because it's not detected environmentally, we do monitor those mosquitoes. We do test them. However, we don't find those detections, thankfully. So we rely on human case surveillance. So people going into their healthcare provider and getting tested and then being able to track back international travel history. And then vector control can then go and treat in the vicinity around or monitor the vicinity around the patient's home to see if there's mosquitoes are present and treat if necessary. So for there to be local transmission, we need somebody who traveled to a country where there was dengue transmission, come home while they're still viremic or they still have virus in their blood, and return to an area where the invasive Aedes are present. Remember, they're not everywhere in the state. And they have to be bitten by a mosquito that lives long enough to become infected and then bites another person who then becomes infected. We've been able to stop this process or keep this process from happening through our monitoring system. And the fact that most people spend a lot of time inside and don't necessarily get exposed to a ton of mosquitoes over the course of their day. However, climate change is making that a lot harder. Last August 2023, Tropical Storm Hillary hit Southern California. So August is usually hot and dry. There's not a ton of mosquito habitat because there's not a ton of water, but the tropical storm brought 2 inches of rain to downtown LA, which broke 1870s rainfall record. And suddenly there was a bunch of water. 80s are urban mosquitoes, and they're called container breeders. So you can see this is a bottle cap from a bottle of water. And these mosquitoes are breeding just fine in just that water. And you can see there's like 24 mosquitoes that are going to be emerging from that. So suddenly we now have the warm temperatures, which increase the probability of virus transmission. And we also have the water. So we've got the habitat, and we are now seeing a large amount of mosquitoes, much more than we usually see. And so then last October, we received reports of 2 locally acquired dengue cases from Los Angeles County, one person from Pasadena, one person from Long Beach. Neither of them had traveled outside of California. And they were both what we call PCR positive, which means we found active virus in their blood. One was positive for what we call dengue 1, and one was positive for dengue 3. These are 2 actually different viruses, which means there was 2 different, dengue was introduced to local transmission at least twice. Public health works really closely with vector control agencies. So even before we had confirmatory test results, they were out there looking in the vicinity of the patient's homes, conducting mosquito surveillance and control. And in the follow-up, public health went door to door to provide education to the neighbors, and then also offer testing. And we found 1 additional person who was infected in Pasadena. However, this person did not develop symptoms, so they don't officially count as a case for bureaucratic reasons. So that brings us to 2024, dengue in the Americas. As you can see, this is dengue cases reported every year throughout the entirety of the Americas, South, Central, and North America, as well as the Caribbean. You can see there has been just a drastic increase in number of cases this year. This is a historic high, more than double the previous things. And as remember from previously, we are at peak mosquito transmission, dengue transmission time right now for most of Central America and Latin America, and the Caribbean. So we're going to expect a higher number of cases. That means we're seeing a lot more returning travelers from that previous slide where we've more than hit our annual number, even though we're only partway through the year. And that leads us to locally acquired dengue in 2024. This is an emerging situation, but last Monday, Los Angeles County reported that they had one locally acquired dengue case in a resident of the city of Baldwin Park. And during the response, they went door to door, they offered testing, and they found 2 additional individuals who had dengue who lived in that area. So public health and vector control response is ongoing. They're working hard. They're working very hard right now, and we all are. And so we're going to see dengue incidence to continue to increase as the climate warms, and which means we're going to see even more people at risk for exposure. We're going to see up to 2.25 billion people. We're going to see up to 7 billion people, as currently around 2 billion people at risk. In general, there's multiple ways that climate impacts mosquito-borne diseases. As temperature rises, we're going to see larger populations, more infections, and we're going to see longer transmission seasons. And then also extreme wet water precipitation will be affecting it as well. So when precipitation is very low, that actually concentrates the mosquitoes. They really love standing water. And for West Nile virus, it's going to concentrate the birds, and that actually creates like a really big hot spot, which can then spill over into the area. And then as we saw from last year's hurricane going through Los Angeles, very high precipitation also can create more aquatic habitat, and that will then create more mosquito populations and virus activity. So there's not really good outcomes regardless of the precipitation effects. I do want to touch on equity considerations, that we are very well aware that outdoor workers, including farm workers, landscapers, construction, are disproportionately being exposed right now to these viruses because they're outside, the mosquitoes that carry them. They're also being exposed to the impacts of the climate itself. And we're also concerned that there's a lot of socioeconomic drivers, that we know that invasive Aedes abundance is higher in lower income neighborhoods. We also know that people are less likely to be using air conditioning because it costs money, and so they're going to have their doors and windows open, so they're going to be more frequently exposed to the mosquitoes. We also know that in those neighborhoods, individuals are less likely to have health insurance and access to health care, so they are going to be less likely to get treatment, but also unable for us to monitor them so that we could then respond. In fact, we know that there are multiple people who during that outreach in those neighborhoods were individuals who didn't have access to healthcare and only got tested because we were offering it for free. So it's a huge aspect of our work that can't be covered in 20 minutes, but I wanted to mention, and that this is an enormous part of our mission right now, is to find how to identify and protect these individuals and get the resources to those who need it. So I'm going to wind up by saying thank you. I'm going to acknowledge my colleagues at the California Department of Public Health, the rest of my EPI team, Vicki Kramer and Kim Trupp, who is our tick specialist, Sharon Messenger, Duke Vuja. If you have questions, and I actually have to hop off this meeting very soon. I have another urgent meeting related to dengue, not surprisingly. But please feel free to email me or my colleague, Andrea Lund, who is our climate specialist. And if I take away any message, is dump and drain standing water around your home, wear repellent, and report dead birds. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mary Beth. That was amazing. I'm afraid a little bit more bad news, but you know, we can do better, right? We can get rid of that standing water. And I was just curious if there's what's the best thing for repellents?
So we actually have on the CDPH website, and I'll put the link in the chat, a link to a toolkit for EPA registered repellents. There's a number that are incredibly safe to use for adults and children, and are really effective against not only mosquitoes, but ticks. I know that ticks are a big concern in the Bay Area, biting insects, and these are safe for both us to use and for the environment. I know that's a big concern. So I will put a link to that toolkit and to the EPA thing in our chat.
Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And next up, we're going to have Fatima introduce our next speaker. Go ahead, Fatima.
Hi, everyone, again. The next topic is climate health and food sovereignty. For this, we have a speaker, Reverend Michael Smith, with a PhD, and he's also with the Center of Food, Faith, and Justice.
I am honored to be here. Good morning, everyone. I am Michael Smith, pastor at McGee Avenue Baptist Church and the executive director for the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice in Berkeley. We do a lot around climate action, particularly as it relates to food sovereignty and food resiliency. And this day we're talking this morning, and we're just really excited to be here, talking really about the connections between food sovereignty, climate, and health. And one of the most important things I think that we do at the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice is really try to make climate action and food sovereignty meaningful for communities and people who are often marginalized and left behind. So we run 3 core programs at the center. We have a program for 7 to 10-year-olds called Seeds of Hope that we really talk to them a lot about environmental education, environmental stewardship, and we do that primarily through gardening, but it's really about helping young people to be community conscious and really working together. And then we have a middle and high school violence interruption program that Cheryl actually helped us to establish back in 2018, 2019, which is called Voices Against Violence. Even though it is a violence interruption program, there's a heavy bend on what we do around health and climate action, because we see violence as an environmental justice issue. We see violence as a public health issue. And we also, really get them conscious of not only working together on food resiliency issues in the garden, but really looking at that as a higher level of civic engagement. We want young people, and particularly marginalized young people, and particularly young people of color, to understand that the conditions that they experience as it relates to violence, as it relates to health, those things are not random. They're often deliberate. There are environmental and health factors, health equity factors that are oftentimes associated and intersecting with what we do. And so we want to try to build that higher level of consciousness as we really talk about civic engagement and civic responsibility. We want young folks to feel empowered, that they can also make a difference where they live, making connections between, why along the I-880 corridor, there are higher rates of asthma. When we really think about what is happening, when we look at the cities of the East Bay, particularly in West Oakland, particularly in Richmond, and you can make those connections. We see that as, an issue of violence against the people as well. And so we often talk about community violence, and we do want to stop and interrupt things like gun violence, and we want to stop, things like murder in our communities. But we really want to look at the totality of what we do. The third program that we run is a workforce investment and food and climate resiliency program called Beyond the Table. And it is no upper age limit, but our target population is 18 to 25. And we really look at young adults and really engaging them in food resiliency. We focus primarily on what we're doing in South Berkeley. We have a garden at the church, but we also are working and managing gardens at Grove Park in South Berkeley. We're going to be breaking ground on a new garden at Greg Brown Park further in South Berkeley. And we care for the garden at the West Berkeley Family Wellness Center, and really looking at how we engage community. We teach classes on urban gardening and the connections between food sovereignty and food resilience. Cheryl, I don't know if you have the slides. I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's some things around food sovereignty that I really want to link as it relates particularly to what food resiliency is, community food resiliency is, and how it relates to things like child hunger. I don't know if you have those slides. So one of the things that we really want to do is understand that in the realm of climate and food sovereignty, there are three levels, and we often get those things confused. So if you go to the next slide, we talk about making sure that we can clarify. There is the issue of food sovereignty versus food justice and food security. And I think it's really important, particularly for communities, to understand the connections with help to understand the distinctions between those three terms. When we talk about food security, essentially, all we're really talking about is there is enough food for everyone. And the reality is, even then, throughout the world, but particularly in this country, when we talk about hunger and things like that, truthfully, there is more than enough food to go around. Now, when we start talking about food access and food quality, those become issues more so of food justice. So one of the things that we need to start looking at, right? Many of you understand the term food desert, right? What are food deserts, or food swamps? A food desert is where there's no availability, of full service, fresh food, farmers market, grocery stores in a particular area. What is a food swamp? Food swamp is, why there may be an abundance of food, but it's not healthy food. It's fast food. It's, AMPMs, liquor stores. It's all the stuff that we probably don't need. Over reliance on processed foods. Food swamps and food deserts often populate. And so they have, obvious connections to our health. that we need to be real about, right? So, when we start thinking about the issues and the connections of climate and food sovereignty, food justice, and food security, if you're reliant or overly reliant on fast food, if you're over reliant on, red hot burritos and things you get from the corner liquor store and all these things that are not necessarily good for our bodies, you start making the connections between higher rates, particularly in communities of color, particularly in impoverished communities. When you start thinking about the issues of heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, and all things that are often chronically overrepresented. What does that have to do with food sovereignty? Well, food sovereignty becomes the highest level of what we want to aspire to when we make those connections. Food sovereignty is not just about the justice issues. It's not just about the access and the availability issues, but food sovereignty is also about what we control, how we grow, distribute, how folks get fair wages in the communities for the food that they grow, for the food that they sell. In the city of Berkeley, like some of the other cities of the East Bay, they have urban agriculture ordinances where, you can basically, grow and sell, package certain produces, right? In your own kitchens or your own gardens, your own mini farms. And I think those are great. But one of the things we need to think about is that's great oftentimes for individuals, but how do communities, right? How do institutions in communities, nonprofits, faith institutions, mom and pop kind of operations really have more of a say-so and control of the food that's produced and grown. And again, the fair wages that we get. Food sovereignty is the height of what we really want to experience and has a direct correlation in how we understand, health and wellness in our community. The other piece of that that's really important is food sovereignty also really looks at some of the cultural and ancestral roots of the food that is produced, right? How it is consumed, how it is shared, how we articulate the importance of that within our communities, within our culture, in our heritage. Those things are crucial to the vital, and the impact, the influence of what it means to be a food economy. So we want to make sure we clarify those things and their connections and their intersectionalities when we talk about health. Cheryl, if you want to go to the next slide. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but it is really important to understand the pillars of the food sovereignty movement. In 1996, there was a major summit in Rome. And the roots of food sovereignty, and particularly agroecology, which we promote at the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice, finds its way into the La Campesina movement that originated and emerged out of Latin America and the Caribbean. I say that all throughout the world, indigenous communities have practiced campesina, farmer, movements, right? Where ancestors have grown in existence with the land. When we talk about agroecology, it's really about agriculture and nature working together. And that's really important for the vital health of the planet, but also the vital health of those who inhabit the planet, people, plants, animals. It's really important to understand that. And the campesina movement really pushed back against things like industrial agriculture, which we know is heavily reliant on chemical inputs, which has catastrophic effects on our health. But when we really look at more natural and ancestral methods, the way that folks have been farming for millennia, and really look at the way that it is intended to be used, I will stop and say, one of the things that we have to be honest about any type of farming, if you cultivate plants for the purpose of growing, distributing, whatever, you do have to acknowledge the fact that the way that things grow on a farm, even in our ancestral methods, are not exactly the way they grow in nature. That said, we really want to be as least impactful on nature and the planet because we know it has dire consequences for our health if we're really heavily reliant on chemical inputs, fossil fuel-based fertilizers, those connections that we have to be able to make to our health. So we promote agroecology as a preferred method, and natural gardening as a preferred method, as the way that we take care of the environment, the way we promote food sovereignty and build resilient food communities, but also the way that we take care of each other and our health. Next slide, really quick. Couple of things I want to lift up in that, beyond the cultivation, of the movement. It is really important that we understand that this movement is not just a local movement. We're focused, really on what we're doing here in the Bay Area, but the reality is the movement of food sovereignty, the movement of agroecology, over the last 15, 20 years has grown exponentially, throughout the nation and throughout the world. And the truth of the matter is, I say it's grown exponentially. That's kind of a misnomer, because all we're really talking about is reaching back for practices that people have engaged for hundreds of years, if not for millennia. But the movement, as the movement has gotten stronger over the last 20 years, it's important that we really look at the health of our planet, we look at the health of our communities, and we understand the way that we farm, the way that we grow and produce food has huge impact on the way that we realize and actualize health and wellness in our community. So one of the things that we encourage folks to really look at the food resiliency movement in terms of really being local, really do a walk, right? Do a walk in your neighborhoods and think about the availability of fresh, healthy foods. And even if you go and encounter things like farmers markets, why is it that the farmers market is not necessarily affordable for the people who have the biggest challenges around economics, the biggest challenges around health? What we really want to do is think about a consciousness that makes people more consciousness that engages more people and is accessible to more people. And again, particularly the people that don't always have access. Next slide, quick, please. A couple of things I think you need to think about as a health issue is about child hunger, children in hunger. And I think it's really important, the pandemic a few years ago really highlighted much of what was really happening with children. I will stop and say, we do work at the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice, not just here, but we're building partnerships in Ghana, in South Africa, in Nigeria. And Dr. Kelvin Sauls, who is originally from Johannesburg in South Africa, who actually is stationed in Los Angeles now, but still goes back to South Africa 3 or 4 times a year. He was talking about the ongoing effect of the coronavirus in South Africa is catastrophic. It's at the point that HIV/AIDS was several years ago, and that since the pandemic has officially been over, there hasn't been a lot of attention put on how the pandemic ravaged much of sub-Saharan Africa over the years. And that is true in many impoverished places in the world. And one of the things that Cheryl can attest to is that when she helped us set up our Voices Against Violence program, it was a phenomenal program. When the pandemic hit, we had 32 kids we were working with. We lost a third of our kids immediately to the pandemic because their families, mom or grandma, whoever their primary caregiver was, they lost their job, they lost their home, lost their apartment, and they didn't just move out of Oakland or Berkeley or the East Bay. They ended up having to move out of the area. They had to move out of the state, or they had to move from Northern California to Southern California. We had some folks that had to move with relatives to Louisiana, some that had to move up to Washington. And you think about the disruption of what that does. The issue of hunger if you really think about the pandemic as a health issue, if you remember the long lines at food banks, in soup kitchens, many of us remember the empty shelves at the grocery stores. The issue of child hunger was always a major issue in this country, right? But the pandemic shined more light on that. And so if you really start thinking about hunger and its connection, not just to health, but its connection to poverty, one of the reasons why at the Center for Food, Faith, and Justice, we really talk about, teaching people to grow their own and teaching people to become more food resilient is because we understand that the access to fresh, healthy food isn't just, a right, but it's also a responsibility that we have one to the other. And some of the issues that we deal with, particularly around chronic disease, we also understand that they are diet related. And so how we build, resilient food systems really takes into account the issues of health equity, because we oftentimes don't really want to talk. We talk about healthcare access, which is good, and I believe it should be universal, but that doesn't necessarily mean just because you have access, there's equity in the healthcare system. And one of the things that we try to talk about is how do we heal ourselves, not just physiologically, but emotionally, mentally. How do we heal ourselves with and through food, through good, rich, healthy food, not the food that we're often given in factories. And so one of the pieces that we're really engaged with, as I mentioned, our 3 programs, is really looking at the intersectionality of what wellness really looks like. And part of that is how we think about the food that we produce. We try to get people thinking, especially young people, food should not be a commodity. It should be something that we grow together. If you think about food, that food should be cheap, that food should just be convenient. Well, one of the problems, there's a guy at Duke University, Norman Wurzba, who often says, if you think food should just be cheap and convenient, you think that life should always be cheap and convenient. And we know that, in the work that Cheryl and the Climate Emergency Task Force, really talks about, part of it is this is work where we have to roll up our sleeve. We have to challenge structures and systems and the powers that be, whether it is in the healthcare system, whether it's at City Hall, whether it's in the food system. We have to challenge them to say that, no, we want the right types of foods, and we want fair equity for our food, and we want equity in our healthcare system. And oftentimes that requires us rolling up our sleeves. We don't want things that are cheap because we know that things that are cheap often are devalued, and we don't want to commodify everything. And part of the problem that we have in our food system is because we want to commodify and monetize everything. As such, we devalue some things and elevate the value of other things that may not be in connection with the best values of the human spirit and what we want to do. And this is not an easy task. It is not an easy task to teach communities and to teach young people, especially. Some of y'all might be surprised that, we have to start from scratch with some of our young people. I mean, we have people oftentimes as we start teaching about food sovereignty and urban gardening that, literally don't realize that a tomato comes off of a vine that grows up out the ground. I know it seems silly. I think it seems silly to a lot of folks, but I think you have to start somewhere. So one of the things that we do when we talk about health equity, when we talk about food sovereignty, we don't come in with the idea of preaching to people. We don't come in with the idea of this heavy-handed top-down approach about what folks don't know. We try to create shared learning spaces, whether we're talking about health and the impact of things like chronic disease, such as diabetes, such as things like hypertension in our communities. When we talk about food sovereignty, we try to keep it very basic. And we really want to lift up the knowledge that is already there. Ancestral knowledge that's often lost, that has been shared, over time, but also the knowledge of the community. Because oftentimes when you listen to young people and you listen to their families, many of the solutions that that are there, are things that are very practical and can be impactful in terms of the way that we work. But we really want to be organic in our orientation and really making sure we have much that we can share with folks, but we don't really want to approach it as a way of, the community doesn't know, or young people don't know, or their families don't know. We really want to approach in the way of, hey, this is how we learn together. This is how we grow together. And this is how we become healthier together. The issue of child hunger is important. I know Cheryl does a lot of work on college campuses, but we need to bring attention as well to the fact that on college campuses, UC Berkeley and other places, the fact that young people are college students and they have to choose between eating and buying books or lab supplies is unconscionable, right? And the issue, and I will say that UC Berkeley has tried to do a better job the last 3 or 4 years addressing student hunger on campus, but it is still a huge issue as it relates to health and wellness for college students. And so one of the great things, about Cal, and they haven't figured everything out, but one of the things at Cal that they do have student farms. And we see some of the community colleges in the area have fallen suit. That when young people, young college students can grow their own, learn their own, the larger issue of community food resiliency, particularly as it relates to college campuses and food pantries. And food pantries, I don't have anything against food pantries, but one of the things that we really need to think about is, where people can grow and cultivate food closest to where the pain and anxiety is. We know there's more control and more say-so in what they do. We also,
hey, excuse me,
I'm sorry.
we're at time, but you can wrap up your last thought. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I'm glad. The very last thing I would say is we're doing work with seniors as well. We're working with the Harriet Tubman Terrace Apartments, and we're working with seniors. There's about 90 seniors in the area and in South Berkeley, and we're really looking at how we can help them become more food resilient and health conscious in what we do. You can get in touch with me through Cheryl. I would be more than happy to talk to you about our programming and the work that we do. And continue on. And I just really want to encourage the Climate Emergency Mobilization Task Force and the great work that they do.
I'm trying to unmute myself.
Sorry, Cheryl.
Thank you.
I keep going on. I'm sorry. I had a lot
No,
of
that's
stuff to share.
okay. It was excellent, excellent, excellent. We appreciate it. And thank you so much for being here. And it was a great presentation. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon. And yeah, and thank you for all. Some of y'all might not know, but Reverend Smith is on our steering committee and also lets us occupy the space of the church to meet with the fellows. So thank you for all your help. And there was a question, someone with 1405 has had their hand raised for quite some time. So I'm going to take that question. I guess we're not going to take a little break, but because we're running behind a little bit, but go ahead with your question real quick.
Just a great talk, just wonderful person you are. Can you share your name and email with us, spelling your name?
Yeah. Name is Michael Smith. Michael Smith. And Cheryl, can I put my email in the chat?
Definitely. And I can
I am
include it in there.
blind, so I'm asking you to put your spell your email, please.
I'll drop his email in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. And thank you again, Reverend Smith. And so we were going to take a break, but since we went over, we'll probably skip that for now. And we're going to have our next student who is, I think it's, wait, I'm trying to get my computer up. It's Nisa, who's going to introduce our next speaker. Go ahead, Nisa. And Jack, can you highlight our next speaker, please?
Thank you, Cheryl. So next we have Palestine and climate justice with Lou Jane Al-Saleh. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. Justice Transition Coordinator, communities for a better environment.
Thank you. Thanks so much. And thank you so much for having me today. It's an honor to be here and learning a lot today. And so before I go into my presentation, I just want to first honor, since October of last year, nearly 42,000 Palestinians have been killed, more than half of them women and children. In Gaza, and this does not include the nearly 100,000 that have been wounded with life-altering injuries. It doesn't include the over 600 Palestinians that have been killed in the West Bank, or the nearly 10,000 Palestinians that are being held in Israel's mass detention prisons right now, where they're subjected to unspeakable horrors. And I just wanted to show this image of this resource and tool called Visualizing Palestine, which has incredible graphics, and they've done an incredible work to also document what's been happening in Gaza and to be able to provide tools and resources for people around the world. So I'd highly recommend looking more into their work. And they actually recently released a book that is, I believe, on Haymarket Books that you can look into as well. Along with the number of people killed, this does not include the complete destruction of all universities, nearly 80% of all health and education facilities. It does not include the mass displacement of Palestinians in Gaza. And this also doesn't really encompass, I'm sure many of you have seen the Lancet recent estimate that there will likely be more than 200,000 Palestinians that die due to disease like polio that we're seeing, hepatitis A. So this number really doesn't truly encompass the mass death and genocide against the Palestinian people. And I also just want to commemorate my cousin who was killed on October 22nd in Gaza. He's on the right of this image, and you can see him with his childhood friend, Yasser Murtaja, who they were journalists, and they represent he's one of the 116 journalists that have been killed since October 2023. And this is an image of them covering the Great March of Return in 2018. And during this march, Yasser was actually killed by a sniper while he was reporting. And my cousin was killed in his family home by an airstrike. And so I just want to honor their legacies and all that they have done to document life in Gaza, both the suffering and also the immense beauty. So I just wanted to take time to honor him. And relating to climate justice and environmental justice, Rushdie worked with this organization called Forensic Architecture to document the herbicidal warfare in Gaza. So the Israeli military would spray right alongside the fields herbicides that you can see have contaminated these plants. And this is just an image of some of the work that he did. And I'd highly recommend also looking at their website too. They have incredible resources and investigations on environmental justice issues around the world. And then he also worked on documenting this project led by Leila Al-Haddad, who is a Palestinian American from Gaza, and her work on food sovereignty in Gaza. And I put a link to the video if you have time to take a look. It's a really beautiful project and highlights a lot of what we've been talking about in this meeting. And so in this presentation, I'm going to go over the connection between Palestine and climate justice, and also talk about the connection between environmental injustice in the US and Palestine, with specifically focusing on Chevron and some of the work that we do locally at CBE in Richmond. And then I will also cover ways that you can support the international movement for Palestine and climate justice. And so first, I want to go over this quote by Palestinian scholar Edward Said, who states that part of the main plan of imperialism is that we will give you your history, we will write it for you, we will reorder the past. What's more truly frightening is the defacement, the mutilation, and ultimately the eradication of history in order to create an order that is favorable to the United States. And so, this quote is consistent with the effort that we've seen both in the US and Israel to erase histories, memories, and an attempt to reorder the past. And it also directly relates to the occupation and colonization of native land, and the practice of the manifest destiny, which I'm going to get into in this presentation. And so this image shows an image of a Palestinian woman who's crying as one of her olive trees was being destroyed in the West Bank village of Salem, and just represents this type of narrative around the manifest destiny. And so from the early stages of Zionism to today, Zionist narratives depicted Palestine as an empty, neglected desert for thousands of years. And for example, Shimon Peres, who was the 8th prime minister of Israel and the 9th president, said that the country, and he's referring to Palestine, was mostly an empty desert with only a few islands of Arab settlements. And Israel's cultivable land today was indeed redeemed from swamp and wilderness. And then this is a quote too that I've seen a lot just being cited as making the desert bloom. So there's this narrative that we made the desert bloom, that this land is inhospitable, people aren't taking care of it, this kind of narrative. And I just want to highlight also a scholar who teaches at UC Davis that I have found her work to be really helpful in understanding this narrative. And she writes more about the justification of taking land through this narrative in her book, The Arid Lands, which is depicted on the left. And she writes that before the word desertification was coined in the 1920s by a French colonial forester, Western imperial powers had executed many different types of programs to try to curtail the perceived spread of deserts, and also to try to restore the dry lands to productivity. Underlying these attempts was a complex, long-standing, and primarily Anglo-European assumption that the world's dry lands are worthless, deforested, and overgrazed landscapes, and has led since the colonial period to programs and policies that have been systematically damaged, dryland environments and marginalized large numbers of indigenous peoples, many of whom had been using the land sustainably. The narrative that Professor Davis describes encompasses Zionist ideologies about Palestinian land being empty and deserted, while also blaming Palestinians for poor natural resource management. This is also the same rhetoric that European colonizers used to describe Native Americans in the United States. And I just want to highlight an example of this. This is a quote by Andrew Jackson, who says, in this quote, he says, "What good man would prefer a country covered with forests and ranged by a few thousand savages to our extensive republic, studded with cities, towns, and prosperous farms, embellished with all the improvements which art can devise or industry execute, occupied by more than 12 million happy people and filled with all the blessings of liberty, civilization, and religion." And on the right, you can see this painting of the Trail of Tears, and the mass displacement and genocide against Native peoples here in this country. So I just wanted to make that link and that connection. And this image here is an image of a village in 1968 that was bulldozed by the Jewish National Fund. And they're an organization that essentially used environmental projects such as planting trees to take Palestinian land. In this case, on the bottom image, you can see the Jewish National Fund developed this park, which is on top of the bulldozed village that was bulldozed in the 60s. The JNF has uprooted endemic agriculture, has blocked Palestinians access to extremely scarce water resources, and continues to do this until today, where it plants trees in the name of the environment while displacing Palestinians from their homes and their villages. In this image here, this is another image from Visualizing Palestine that shows the number of trees that have been uprooted in Palestine. There's been approximately, and these aren't recent numbers, this is from almost over 10 years ago, that 800,000 trees have been uprooted in Palestine. This is 33 times the size of Central Park. So this is an image here showing what it would look like to uproot Central Park in New York City. And it also includes the numbers of families affected, which continues to grow today. Well past beyond 80,000 families have been impacted by this. Along with the uprooting of olive trees and the impact on Palestinian livelihood, I want to talk about, this is a direct connection to environmental justice that we see in the United States in terms of toxic waste sites being cited and put in communities of color. And so in this case, this is another image showing the hazard waste transfer in Palestine, the lack of regulatory supervision, directly discharging wastewater also into Palestinian land as well, along with solid waste. And I want to give an example of a specific manufacturer, which was a pesticide and fertilizer manufacturer called Gashuri. And it was moved from, essentially, it moved to the West Bank, right next to a village called Tulkarem. And once the facility moved to Tulkarem, residents started having trouble breathing. There was an increase in respiratory illnesses. There's testimony that villagers were, saying they couldn't open their windows because of the fumes and the smells. So this is just yet another example of environmental injustice in Palestine. And then I also want to talk about greenwashing, because this is something that we also see our own government do. We see different organizations do this, companies do this, like Chevron. And so this image is actually an image of a bus ad that I saw when I was when I first I was in San Francisco, and I saw it on a bus ad, a Muni bus ad. And on the bottom it says there was this Israel California water project that is ultimately solved through desalination, and on top we see very anti-Palestinian rhetoric right above it. And so desalination, I'm going to talk more about the myth of desalination and why this is not a actual sustainable practice. And so for more context, desalination is a process of converting seawater into drinking water by removing its salt content. And the process pushes water under high pressure through semi-permeable membranes to filter out salts and minerals. And although it can produce fresh water, it generates brine, which is then pumped back into the ocean, which is highly damaging to marine ecosystems. And there's many other issues, I'm sure, that haven't been studied, and its impact along on wetland ecosystems. And this is just an image of Israel's desalination plant and where it's located. And some of this rhetoric around, we're solving the water crisis through this process. And this is just an image of what the desalination process looks like. And something also really important is that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has pointed out that this process is maladaptive because it also emits climate pollution and energy trade-offs that could make it harder to adapt to climate change in the future. So this is just yet another example of greenwashing that is used. At the same time, as Israel claims to solve its water crisis, it continues to control all water sources in Palestine and has bombed and destroyed water collection sites in villages across occupied Palestine. At the same time, Palestinians do not have access to water from the Jordan River, which is diverted. And you can see that there's a Degania Dam where Israel withdraws most of the water from the upper part of the Jordan River. These are ultimately clear examples of environmental racism and apartheid. And I finally want to talk more about the relationship between environmental racism and injustice here. So I'm going to shift more into our local work and the connections between Chevron in Richmond and Chevron in Palestine. This is an image of commuters that are taking pictures of the fire, the explosion that happened at the Chevron refinery over 10 years ago on August 2012. Many of you that were, either living here during this time probably remember this. It impacted not just Richmond, but cities across the Bay Area. And over 15,000 people went to the hospital because of this, because of the impacts on their respiratory systems and their health. And recently, the Air District released a report that the Chevron refinery is responsible for well over half of the region's locally emitted particulate matter, and which directly impacts our nervous systems. And outside of Richmond, Chevron is one of the top greenhouse gas emitters in the state of California. And this is just an image of the Chevron refinery. It's also the biggest private landowner in Richmond too. This facility is over 3,000 acres. And you can see it's right next to the bay and the ocean as well. And then I'd like to just show this image that the Othering and Belonging Institute developed to show all of the multiple impacts of Chevron on Richmond, and visioning towards a just transition to see Richmond where we're no longer impacted by pollution, from the refinery. And something I also forgot to mention is that the Chevron refinery was actually officially established before Richmond was incorporated as a city. So it's been around for over 100 years. And related to this, Chevron also operates and shares ownership of Israel's largest natural gas fields, the Tamar and Leviathan gas lines or pipelines. And the pipeline is not under Israeli jurisdiction and is ultimately illegal under international law. This is an image that the BDS movement has created to indicate this. And some statistics too on Chevron and its role right now in fueling Israel too is that and every year, Israel collects hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue from these Chevron-operated gas fields. And at the same time, the Israeli electric company cuts off electricity to the occupied West Bank. And it's used as a tool to punish. We have seen this since October. The Israeli military has cut off all electricity to Gaza. And this is ultimately in violation of international law. And it's important to look at how oil is funneled around the world, to also see its correlation with violence and the dispossession of indigenous peoples. And Chevron has also operated and impacted millions of people around the world, from Ecuador to Niger. There's a whole host of countries that have been impacted by Chevron. And I just wanted to make sure to highlight that, given Chevron is also in Richmond. And finally, I'm just going to end on a more positive note that, we have seen mass protests, and the majority of people in the US want to see a ceasefire and want to see this genocide end. We've seen the student protests and the student movement and how powerful it is at UC Berkeley, at universities around the world. And I think for me, this is really hopeful in seeing that people from all walks of life, from various backgrounds, are doing everything that they can to call on their elected officials to stop this. And that's ultimately what gives me hope. And I just want to end on this quote by Ghassan Kanafani, who's a Palestinian novelist who was assassinated by the Israeli foreign intelligence in the 70s. And he says, "Everything in this world can be robbed and stolen except one thing. This one thing is the love that emanates from a human being towards a solid commitment to a conviction or a cause." And yeah, I just want to end on that note. And at the end of my slides too, which we'll share out, I have some ways to get involved, some upcoming events and fundraisers, and then some resources too. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Lujane. How do you say your name? I'm sorry.
Lujane. Got it.
Lujane. Thank you. That's a beautiful name. And it was an excellent presentation. And more sad news. This climate and health is kind of disturbing, it seems like. And yes, free Palestine and the genocide and the ethnic cleansing, which is happening not just in Palestine, but Sudan, the Congo, all these other places. We need to have a world of peace. And thank you so much for highlighting everything for us in the ways in which the destruction is going on that a lot of people might not realize. The greenwashing. So thank you so much. And does anybody have any questions We're a couple minutes late. I don't see any hands raised. So we're gonna move on to the next. And thank you again. And I'm gonna be in touch with you because like I said earlier, my sister and I are, and this other woman, Akila, my sister has a women's voices radio show, and I have 10 minutes every 2 weeks. So maybe next week you can join us for a few minutes to talk about Palestine. That's in the morning at 9 a.m. on kpfz.org. So thank you. I'll be in touch. So I'm going to introduce our next guest, Chandra Collins, who does Qigong. She's amazing. She's been doing Qigong with us at events with Mobilize Berkeley. And it's after all that sad news about health and health issues and impacts and marginalization and genocide and algae blooms and mosquitoes and all the viruses that you can get from the mosquitoes and all the things. So we're gonna try to decompress, feel a little bit better about ourselves, and uplift ourselves with some Qigong. So climate and Qigong. Thank you. Thank you. Climate, health, and Qigong with Chandra. Thank you. You're muted.
Hi, everyone. How are you? So, there's always that thing of yin and yang, and that's what we're getting ready to do today. I would love it if you would take yourselves and have your videos on. It lets me know that I'm just not doing this in front of my own laptop, but I understand if you don't. Join me for a few minutes of just some nice, gentle movements. You can do it seated if you don't want to stand, but I would ask everyone to stand up. I'm going to go step backwards, and let's get started. So join me in Qigong. Now, what Cheryl said is she's right. I am a Qigong instructor, but I also am a chef instructor, and nutrition coach. So I believe in mind, body, spirit, and this is just one of those parts. So here we go. Everyone stand up. I'm going to put on some music in the background. Let me know if you can hear me. Can you see me and hear me okay? Good.
Yes.
One of the positions that we do, I'm just giving you a little something so you know, is called ready position. Your feet are shoulder width apart. Your knees are not locked. They're nice and loose. Hold in your abs. Your chest is up. Shoulders are in place with arms hanging gently by your side, and you're looking forward. Ready position is the position that we start and stop most exercises. In a normal class, we would do a warm-up, but I want to take you through as much Qigong as possible. So for women, take your right hand and you're going to place it 2 belly buttons, 2 fingers below your belly button, and your left hand 2 fingers above your belly button. For men, you're the complete opposite. It's left hand is on the bottom, right hand is on the top. Okay, connect your tongue to your upper palate. We're going to start with a movement that is called jogging. So just jog for a little bit. It's just a nice, gentle bounce with your hands on what is called the lower dantian and the upper dantian. There are 3 phases to the jog. The second phase of the jog, you keep your knees moving. I'm only stopping to demonstrate. You massage your dantian at the same time that you're moving. So massage your dantian. Your tongue is still connected to your upper palate. The third phase of the jog, the hand that's on the bottom, it's released with the palm facing forward. The hand that's on the top gets released with the palm facing backwards. There's a lot of imagination in Qigong. So now imagine there is water that is flowing from your shoulders down your arms onto your fingertips and flick the water onto the ground. Keeping your tongue connected with your upper palate. This is the third phase of our jog. Slowing it down. We're going to jump right into our first movement. I am doing a 5 animal Qigong with you today. So it's going to be active. You're going to have some energy to go do the rest of your day. Feet are a little wider than ready position. This is a 2-part Qigong. We're going to be a crane. So one hand on top of the other is your beak. You start with your palms down, facing you, arms down. You bring your arms up to chest height and back down. That's part 1. This is a flying crane. So the next part is you fly. It goes back, palms are up, back to your beak. You inhale to shoulder height, exhale down. I'm just changing, inhale to fly, exhale back to the beginning. We're going to add the knee. Inhale up, exhale adding the knee down. Inhale to stand fly, exhale with the knee back down. Fantastic, 3 more. Inhale to chest height, exhale down. Inhale to fly, exhale back down. 2 more. Inhale to chest height, exhale with the knee down. Inhale to fly, and exhale back down. Last one. Inhale to chest height, exhale down. Inhale to fly, and back down. Fantastic. Back to ready position, and shake it out. We're now going to be a graceful crane. Legs are a little bit wider than ready position, and palms are by your side. You're going to lift to shoulder height and gracefully come down. This time all the way overhead so that the back of your hands almost touch, and then gracefully down. Inhale to shoulder height. Exhale down. Inhale all the way up. And exhale all the way down. We'll add the knee. Inhale to shoulder height. Exhale with the knee down. Inhale all the way up. Exhale with the knee down. 3 more. Inhale to shoulder height. Exhale down. Inhale all the way up. And exhale down. Last one. Inhale to shoulder height. Exhale down. Inhale all the way up. And exhale down. Fantastic. Back to ready position. Check out the arms. Check out the legs. We're going to be a bear. We're going to be a rotating bear from the waist. Take your hands in a clenched fist and place them on your diaphragm. Without moving the rest of your body, you're moving around in a circle in one direction, like a bear would rotate in the woods. Without moving anything else, do that 3 times in one direction, and now switch sides, switch your direction. I don't know about you, but that feels pretty good to me right now after sitting. And last one. And back to ready position. Shake it out. We're going to be a bear in the woods. This takes us to taking a big step forward. The foot that's going forward, that arm swings forwards. We're going to end in this position. We're going to now switch arms, move them back this way. One more time, switch arms. And now take a big step back with that foot that's extended back to your start. Now, I'm only changing sides so you can see me. You would do this way. All right. Foot that's going forward, that arm swings forward. Nice lunge. Bring it back. Swing it forward. Take a step back to your position. Let's do 2 on each side. Go forward. Lunge. Swing back. Lunge forward. Step back. Other foot. Swing forward. Lunge back. Swing forward. Step back. One more each side. Lunge forward. Swing that arm forward. Lunge back. Swing forward. Step back. Last one. Swing forward. Lunge back. Swing forward. Step back. Shake it out. Listen, I am really trying to be respectful of your time. So we're not going to do 5 animal Qigong. We're going to do 2 animal Qigong. That's what we did. I want to do 2 of my favorite exercises before we run out of town. Run out of time. This one is called 10,000 hands. And that's all of us reaching our hands out across the world. So you extend your fingers wide. You're starting in ready position with the palms facing forward. You're raising your arms all the way up overhead as though 10,000 hands are connected with yours to what is called prayer position. Prayer position is this position with the fingers in. Overhead, you're in prayer position. You receive your blessing. Bring your prayer position to the crown of your head. Now you press the palms together. With you bringing it down, bringing your hands in front of you. Turn your hands pointed down when you get by the chest. Nice low position. Now we're standing to start. Inhale, grasping 10,000 hands on your hands. To prayer position. Receive your blessing. And press the palms with the hands coming down. We're going to add the breath. Inhale up. Hold your breath in prayer position. Receive your blessing. And exhale, pressing the palms down. Let's do 3 more. Inhale up. Hold the breath. Receive your blessing. And exhale down. 2 more. Inhale up. Hold your breath. Receive your blessing. And exhale down. Last one. Inhale up. Hold your breath. Receive your blessing. And exhale down. Back to ready position. Shake out the arms, shake out the legs. Do I have time for one more?
Yes.
One more. Okay, so. I'm sorry. I'm getting a barrage of calls because today is my birthday. So thank you for sharing.
Oh, happy birthday. It's my husband's birthday too.
Oh, that's why we get along so well. Okay, back to the last of my favorite. I was in Uganda this summer, so this exercise has a new name. It's called Ugandan chicken wings. So follow along with me. It is a 4-parter, but you guys have gotten this. Feet are in ready position. Your palms are facing forward. You're bringing your hands to prayer position in front of your chest. You're going to press the palms as you bend with the knee. You're going to stand to what's called chicken wings. You're going to poke at the wall, extending to the horizon. Back to chicken wings. You're gonna push the wall out of your way. Push the wall. Fingertips to chest, coming across. And I'm a chef, so press the platter down to the earth as you add the knee. We're back to the beginning. Stand as you inhale to prayer position. Exhale, pressing the palms. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to poking the wall. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to pushing the wall. Inhale to fingertips to chest. Exhale, pressing it down. Inhale to prayer position. Exhale to pressing the palms. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to poking the wall. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to pushing the wall. Inhale to fingertips to chest. Exhale down. 2 more. Inhale to prayer position. Exhale to pressing the palms. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to poking the wall. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to pushing the wall. Inhale to fingertips to chest. Exhale down. Last one. Inhale to prayer position. Exhale to pressing the palms. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to poking the wall. Inhale to chicken wings. I messed up. Inhale to chicken wings. Exhale to pushing the wall. Inhale to fingertips to chest. And exhale down. Thank you for practicing with me. I have a way to sign off and close out Qigong classes. It's with 3 namastes, and repeat with me or after me, and then a Wakanda forever. Namaste to myself for taking the time to practice today. Namaste with each and every one of you for taking the time to practice with me, because group practice is far more sustaining. And namaste to all of our teachers that we've had in our past, those that are in our present, and those that we encounter in the future. Wakanda forever for all of those in that cancer journey. Wakanda forever for those that have transitioned. And Wakanda forever for those of us who are thriving here today. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I hope you enjoyed yourself.
Yes, yes, yes. That was great. A quick version, but I feel it. I feel good. It moves some chi. So that's great. And I see people have been participating. So that's amazing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. A lot of people have their cameras off, but they're still here. So I'm hoping that they did it too.
I hope so too.
So thank you.
I see some
so
people
again,
still dancing around, so I'm thinking that that's a good thing.
Great. Thank you, Chandra.
Not a problem.
It's always a blessing to be around you and to have Qigong in my life. My husband and I do it too. So thank you, thank you. And that concludes Climate and Health for today. It's been an amazing day. I want to thank all the speakers, Corina, Elise, Cheryl with the C, my favorite, Michaela, Jovanka, Mary Beth, Reverend Dr. Smith, who just got its PhD. Thank you, thank you. And Lou Jane, that was just amazing. And Chandra, of course. So, and thank all of you for being here. Thank you for your donations. Thank you for sharing your time with us this morning. And, you know, we learned a lot. And so we've gotten a lot of tips on things that we can do. So remember to do those things. And then also, I just want to make a couple of announcements. We're going to be doing climate and I just realized it's funny. I was going to drop stuff in the chat. So, but I have it on I'm reading from one computer and have it on both computers, but I realize I can't read from there and then drop from what I'm reading. So I have to open up that. It's like all these little logistic things. So anyway, in July, we're going to be having not July. Oh my goodness. I haven't had enough coffee either. In November, we're going to have climate and fascism. November 15th. We already have 6 people registered, so register for that. And then also we're going to do something that we haven't done before, which is we're partnered with the East Bay Regional Parks District for a BioBlitz. So we're going to be doing that next Saturday, a week from tomorrow, 9 a.m. at Tilden Nature Area. And you can find that on Eventbrite. I'll drop it in the chat in a second, or if anybody else wants to drop it in the chat, that would be great. But that should be really fun. We're going to be joined by the naturalists from Tilden and a couple more naturalists. So if you have an inkling of being a naturalist, contact us, because you could get a little bit of training and guide a group around yourself that day too. But we're going to be we've partnered with, like I said, the East Bay Regional Park District, and our co-sponsors are UC Berkeley Student Environmental Resource Center, Nature Education Wellness Together, and the United Nations Association of the East Bay chapter. And we invite you and to join us with your family and your friends for a fun BioBlitz nature walk at Tilden's nature area, and be part of a community to capture a snapshot of Tilden's biodiversity. And at that, you'll find and identify and record life on the walk around Jewel Lake. There'll be like a flat walk, a slightly hilly walk, or a steep hill walk. So you can choose which group you want to go with. But we're going to meet at the nature area at 9 a.m. You should bring water, wear comfortable shoes, wear layers, sunscreen. Right now, the sun's barely out, but hopefully it'll be warm and sunny next Saturday. And if not, we'll just bundle up and do it anyway. And also, make sure your phone's fully charged. And there are some things that you can do ahead of time by downloading the iNaturalist app and seeing how that goes. If you go into the Eventbrite, there's these instructions, a video, a link to the video, and all of that can be there. And then you can evaluate what we did today. Jack dropped a link in the chat, and we'll send out that again when we send out the recording, which we will send out the recording. And we'll also send out the recording of the kickoff of Climate and Health at the general meeting on Wednesday, in case you missed that, because that was amazing too. And I also want to thank our fellows who did an amazing job introducing our speakers today. So I want to thank Annie, Sophia, Fatima, and Nisa, who are just amazing women that have blessed us with their presence for this semester and next semester. And I also want to thank Jack and Karina and our 2 other, all the steering committee members, Natalie Karras, Reverend Dr. Smith, and Deacon Jones, and Eduardo Martinez, the mayor of Richmond. And also, I want you to just think about how you can increase your health. Drink more water, which I know I need to do. Stop burning, possibly electrify, and go for a walk, go for a swim, hug a tree. I know my neighbor cut his willow tree, and every time I walked by it, I would just grab the willows. And one day he told me that another neighbor in the neighborhood told him that he comes when and cuts the new growth to make some kind of medicinal tincture or something from a willow tree. Who knew? But I never understood why people hug trees, but now I get it. It does increase your health. It makes you feel good. just touching the leaves, and like on a hot day, it cools you down. So just do the things that you can do. Drink fruit, don't eat the fast foods. Cut down your salt intake, maybe your red meat consumption, eliminate it if you can, or cut it down. There's all kinds of things. Go for a walk, go for a hike, go for a swim. And then just say hello to your neighbors. Smile. You can smile more. And like Jovanka said, laugh, because that's really good. And just I just want everyone to know how much I appreciate your support and you being here. And thank you. Jack, did you want to say something? I see that you're.
Well, I just want to give a pitch for the Climate and Fascism event, because we, I think, learned today. I mean, we know from all of our history of all these summits that there are a lot of technical solutions that we can solve the climate crisis. But as the talk about Palestine talked about today, the political challenges are much greater. And there's this really disturbing trend all around the world with these right-wing parties that seem to have at least two things in common. They hate immigrants, and Muslims in particular, and they deny that there's climate, that they are very opposed to doing anything about climate. So we're going to talk about that both globally and in the US. As we know, we have that same dynamic here in the United States. So looking forward to that those presentations, and hope that people can join us in November.
I'm muted. So thank you very much. And then in January, we're going to have climate and education. And then in March, we're going to have climate, youth, and seniors. And maybe we'll have some other kind of cool event to celebrate our 5th year. But maybe it'll be your 6th year that we'll celebrate. We don't know. But we're trying to get things done here. And I think we've done an amazing job this morning. And I hope you think so too. And I hope you'll be back again. And thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a blessed day. And again, happy birthday to Chandra. You didn't tell me it was your birthday, or else I would have maybe done something special more. Let me say happy birthday to you. And again, happy birthday to my husband. We've been married 37 years. And so happy birthday to the Virgos. It's the end of the Virgo sign, but right now, but we're transitioning. And happy fall, and we'll see you November 15th. Thank you. Have a blessed day. Or next Saturday. Don't forget that the Bio Blitz. All right. Bye-bye, y'all.